Hello, this is the artist focus from Out of Sight Chicago, focusing on outdoor performance art practices and the art for unexpected encounters. My name is Trinks, and today I am broadcasting from my home in Rotterdam, the Netherlands. And today you will be watching a pre-recording as this live session took place on November the 10th, evening time in Australia and morning time in the Netherlands. Today, our special guest is WeiZen Ho, who is joining us from Gudungura and Durung lands of the Blue Mountains in Australia, that's near Sydney. WeiZen is born in Melaka, Malaysia, and is a graduate from the social science studies at the University Western Australia in Perth. Since Out of Sight started their online streaming events, we are lucky to have met WeiZen for the first time during the first edition of the Flow Symposium that took place last year. WeiZen's art practice expands from music, visual concerts to solo participatory works that occupy spaces of uncertainty between performance, ritual, and installation. She investigates methods for accessing the memory body through image concepts, sketching, vocal bodywork, improvisational techniques, and mimicry of spirit possession. As a performer and performance deviser, WeiZen's work also involves civic engagement art projects. Her work is expanding across Australia and several Asian countries, which among them are Malaysia, Indonesia, and China. So, hello, WeiZen. It is such a pleasure to have been talking with you in the past week. Welcome here next to me in the Artist Focus. If I said anything incorrect, please tell me. You could maybe correct me.
Yeah. So, I was just going to say, I guess over here, and I probably don't get the pronunciation right, but we keep trying. I think we call it the land and country of the Gundungara and Darug country of the Blue Mountains. Yeah. So I just wanted to,
Yes, please do that.
Thanks for having me.
Yes. So we will be going to discuss two to three projects, which are actually all done in close collaboration with others, artists, and also civic participation, like your project in Bangkok, the Walking Project, and in Sydney's Chinatown. This is the last piece we hope to discuss, which you did in collaboration with artists, I believe, and musicians. But we will start with one of your recent projects, also done in Sydney at Chatswood, as part of the exhibition Parallel Wanderings at the Concourse. This happened this year, in January and February. And so the title is Illuminations of Created Place. And before we are going to watch the short video, is there anything that you would like to say about it?
Yeah, I guess when the curator first talked to me about it for the Willoughby Council, they were kind of looking for another reinterpretation of landscape painting. So really, in that sense, the provocation started from there, of course, because I kind of had to enter it through a different way. Yeah. So that's just the background where it all started, the thinking.
Yeah. Yes. Shall we start with the video?
Sure.
Then? Yes.
Sounds
okay,
good.
let's start with it.
Thanks, Ieke.
Okay. So we also have some slides of your performance. Maybe that's also good that we can look at them while we talk about it. Yeah,
Yeah.
right. Yeah, because in the video we saw like a part of your whole project, because it's a complicated project. I understand it's not just only that performance in this public outdoor area. There has been also a lot of things happened before that, and I would like to hear more about that as well.
So I guess plotting back to how I was asked to reinterpret landscape painting, I had to kind of split up, and I tried to look at it from how landscape from the Chinese calligraphy and character writing really were two characters, which was the mountain and water, or mountain and land, mountain and water. And I guess it was, difficult to enter through that space, except I guess that if I look at the landscape of a place, I thought really the only way to expedite the kind of history of the place, if you're not living there, is to engage with the residents who've lived there for a long time. So part of the process was actually putting out an invitation called Walk With Me to the residents through the council, through ads, going through kind of community notice boards, and essentially getting people of all backgrounds to walk with me so I could kind of gather their stories and what it was like to be a long-term or a transient resident of a place. But actually, I was very fortunate. Most of them had been there for decades, and they had either owned shops there, or they've worked with council and had had several generations of family. One of them there, so it was quite beautiful. And I guess one of the premise of walking on land to get to know it through another person who has been there for a longer period is trying to get this sense of a place through the archive of the feet, like, and I also do believe there's something that happens when we just walk, and it's an ambulatory kind of process, really. Some of them had an idea of what walk they might want to take me on, but as we talked, the walk routes often changed because of what came up. So there's a sense that walking actually can activate the memory body from other places, but other chapters and period of time. So it's a really beautiful way of entering into this. Yeah.
That's very interesting to hear. Just to say that the image that we are looking at right now is still it's after the walkings that you did, right? Yeah. So that's something that is not like documented in that sense, which is interesting too. Actually, if you go to your website, I don't know if that's part is also I don't know if that's documented. And I believe also that it is a part what you've been talking about. What they told you is stayed private, right? It's not being shared.
Correct.
Directly, in your work.
Yeah.
But you have been so it's in a particular area of like north of Sydney, I believe. You told me before it's quite demographically very different in comparison with the city. So I was also curious. So you use like a walking practice to be in conversation with others, people, residents of that place, or who have like a period of time they spend there, and that's your way of learning about that place. Can I understand it also like that? Yeah. And so then I'm very curious about that, because like you have a performance practice, and you've been asked to do work with landscape, and then there's also this whole idea of painting and landscape, of calligraphy. So I find it very interesting. So how have you decided to merge these things together, like the walking, the painting, the idea of landscape? And how did you work with these memories or the stories that you got from the people, the participants?
Well, I must say I did something that hedges on being on ethics, because as I walked the spaces with them, I would grab a handful of sand, I would grab a handful of burnt stumps. The only things that I so I did, and then sometimes rusted toys or objects, so it's the objects that I come across that the resident might notice first, or I would notice first. And I did make sound recordings. It was kind of like, just having a memory of a material from the land, whether it was introduced and rubbish, or a metal toy car. I remember one of the things I found that had rusted over a long period of time, or a glitter of paper that someone dropped, or a sweet wrapper in the bush. And then a lot of it were Angophora barks that were laying on the ground. And I would just take a glean. I call it gleaning. You're gleaning a handful each time.
Right.
But, it kind of borders on, the purists would say, don't take anything from the land. But I did. And I sewed it on, and I pasted it with Japanese rice glue onto the fabric, the calico fabric that I had. And I completely hid it under
let's
10
go to
meter long.
Let's go to the next image. So maybe let's move a little bit through it, so we can also see that what you've been talking about. Let me see. So here you have this long canvas that you work on outside of the art space, right?
So that was the drop sheet, so that so the canvas could be dragged on top of it, because I was using water and charcoal and I guess it's also a couple of years after all of us in many areas where there was a lot of bush environment had gone through fires, so there were all these kind of leftover chunks of burnt wood.
I see.
So I guess the action for me was a lot of it about revealing what was underneath, because it felt like that's a part of one perspective on landscape, and how we weather the land that we're in. It also stipulates to how much we work on the land, and we have toiled it, we have destroyed. It's so many to the simple actions, and and being able to grab things from my hair and really basic human actions.
I really like to see all these different handlings, or how would I call it, techniques that you use. Like I see, in one way, your body is utilized to be like a tool to create the landscape on the canvas. And that's also what I see happening. That's my interpretation. And it's very interesting that in one moment you are rolling, and the other moment you're stabbing. And I also see you use your hair. And it is, I was also wondering, because we've been talking of course before, and what I also found very inspiring to hear you talk about is you did research on rituals, and also particularly on like a female or feminist, or how do you call it, shamanism by women, and the rituals you have been also being attending. And I understand that is also for you a very important a source of where you find your rituals or that you include in your work. Is that also something that I see here that comes back? Is it not non-related? I was wondering.
Yeah, well, because I see the observation of these rituals to be a life process. It is very much always a part of what I am doing, whether I'm reading about it or I'm moving to places and hoping to uncover this in many ways. And I guess it became formalized initially within Southeast Asia because I thought, well, what better way to observe these things than from where my home region of cultural activities are? So you go in there with a slightly different way. And I guess a lot of the rituals in Southeast Asia, when I see it, it has a strong historical link to animism. But then I was talking to Ieke, like in a way, all of us who are standing right now on Earth, engaging with the Earth, living now, have a historical connection to animism anyway, at some point in their lives, regardless of whether it's gone through some level of religious institution. So when I move into animistic rituals, it's very elemental. There's a lot of guts, there's a lot of rawness, and it's always the action of extraordinariness that just sits outside the sphere of ordinary human actions, that is particularly transformative for me. So I do apply what I observe, but as a one amazing thing about witnessing something live is that it sits in your own memory body. So when I'm going through this process, especially if there's a duration to it, I guess all these experiences of witnessing really influences me. It's inspired me to turn it in this fashion. And even though their structures and the materials are quite clear, every time I come back to it, because I had 3 performance days to do that, where first day and then it goes back to the gallery, it got hung a different way, and then the second day, something else happened. So after I do each one, something else comes up and something else comes up. In a way, I'm using my body to weather this material, to create this landscape somehow.
I have another question.
Yeah.
I would love to go deeper in that, but I'm also curious. So it's like the inside, it's resting there, and then you take it out again to work further on the landscape with your specific material, with the materials. And why are you going outside? Why is it not? Because I find it beautiful that it's outside, but I'm very curious why you bring it every time outside again, and why is it not being worked on inside, for example?
Well, the issue with most gallery cultures is they're really fussy about cleanliness.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, it would be impossible. Like even working on the outside space, we had to, materially provide 10 drop sheets so that this charcoal that I'm pounding, the ochre and the water, it was, I'm afraid it was a bit of a logistical thing. But on the other hand, landscape should exist outside. And, and if I'm put inside, I'm kind of also interested, like I said, about, well, how do I change this kind of social demarcation of space, by going through outside and in and bringing something outside in and inside out. And what is this? What is this? Where are the extensions of our spaces? But yes, very kind to allow me to flip the walls and everything, I guess.
That's interesting that they let you do this. But I think it's interesting because also we've been talking, of course, before about the use of the outdoor public spaces, and I don't know if it's particularly Asian countries, or we were talking also about the contemporary societies and how everything is so much indoors and not so much to public. So I thought I see also a relation here, kind of breaking that open, because this seems to be a very controlled, clean space, and you try to find your openness to still manifest that the other world, I guess, that belongs to that the ritual and working with these materials, that makes it maybe more messy. I don't know in whose eyes it should be messy, but so I think it's interesting. We have to continue also to the next, I think, for the time.
Yes.
But it's interesting also that here I don't see the huge canvas anymore in your last presentation. You decided to.
Well, I didn't have a choice. The one of the days of the performance, it was completely raining, and I did the performance in the rain as well. And the drying out of it would have been difficult. It would have affected the other artworks somehow, the dampness. So we had to kind of revise. And so these are, often, also because I am not really, installation is such a new territory for me. It's like I really had to work and negotiate this with the curator all the time to then, well, what is the aftermath and this feeling of something like this, because it was the only dynamic element in the installation that kept changing and changing.
Interesting. I guess that is usually difficult for certain institutions, art spaces, when things are unclear, and from a performance art perspective, you often don't know how it will be. And let's go to another project that you did in Bangkok in 2018, and which I understood was your first participatory project with, so let's say, a non-artist. Should we first watch, or would you like to introduce something about that?
No, let's
project?
watch it.
Yeah. Okay, let's go then to that video. It's without sound. It's actually a more of a slideshow. So maybe we could also, while we're watching this, discuss already, if that's okay with you. Yeah. So
Yeah.
because I think everybody probably already get some impression of what is happening.
Yeah.
So I noticed that you call yourself a performance deviser, and what I you are participating in this walk, but I believe you're not walking in front. So I feel like you are like not the performer and bringing the other people, but there seems to be like others who are taking the lead. And I was wondering how you developed this. Is it like who is there somebody else who came with this idea? The community? I'm very curious about that. How that went.
Well, I think the structure perhaps may not have been as collaborative as I would have liked it to be, mainly because of time, and there was all these language translation, and it was actually really hard to get the participants and to communicate this intention as the concept was being developed as we landed in Bangkok, and there were all these kind of information going through. But I did feel as if it was really important for the walk to be led by the oldest person who would be willing to participate, because I had a feeling that that would be a really beautiful way of setting the pace. You know, you walk to what the oldest person is able to walk. We just happen to have a very, very fit older 91-year-old, I think. And the idea was then to ask, who might some of the young children who would be interested in being there, and if, for example, the oldest participant may have relatives or grandchildren to be involved in it. Because I guess these communities kind of live very close together in relationship to the temple, in relationship to this really old food market where they sell fresh fruit, but they also make it. So it's a really tight-knit community. And I guess in a way, I was giving some compositional options. Like if this was not possible, then we would start negotiation if that wasn't possible. But I had some clear parameters that might help ease the thing a little bit quicker, because so much was actually trying to find participation. I mean, that's always the biggest challenge, because you may have an idea, you'd love it, but like the depth of relationships is how you get participation. And we actually needed more time, so that was more of an experiment more than anything else.
How much time you had to work with the community?
I think we had a week and a half. And I had to also develop another piece of ensemble work while I was there. But they were really supportive, and I think we were very lucky because Buffalo Field was run by a social architect who had actually tried to assist this community. So I think because of that trust, I think often when you go into a cultural community, you do need a cultural mediator. If not necessarily someone who speaks the language, but certainly then someone who has the kind of relationships that is helpful.
I see. Yes.
You're always working with someone to help you.
Yes. Yeah, it requires a lot of time to invest, because why would somebody work with a stranger? And it's also what do they get out of it, right? Why would they? But I understand there is something at stake. The housing are in bad conditions, I understand, and there's the underground subway, so they are their houses they are threatened to lose their ground, right? So was this also really like for them a reason to participate in the walk? Were there also conversations about it, or was it more difficult because you speak different languages? So that
Yes, I
makes it
think
harder.
I was able to have a couple of direct communication with, like informal community leaders, and they were then able to kind of mediate and translate as I asked questions, and they had questions to ask me, and they had a lot of questions to ask me. But I tried to explain, I guess, that it was a temporary process to kind of reclaim the space for themselves. We couldn't do anything practical, but for themselves, the fact that they could be visible and lead this walk and offer a gift to almost it was a kind of sacred act for them. They understood about temple flowers and what it is like. So it's not the monk who do this, it is the people who give this to themselves. This kind of feeling, I think they understood. They liked it.
Yeah.
Because it's partly devotional and it's partly fun, and the kids always make it fun. And it was something special for them, and it's on an area that obviously it's the entire home, because the homes for them don't sit within the kind of houses they say we have here. It's always extension of something much, much bigger. Yeah.
I also understand like the walking, it is called a social walking ritual. So you include the word ritual in this in your title. So I see there an importance, maybe also because it is in the area of the temple. So I understand this area is like a sacred ground. Can I understand it like that, or that?
Well, I have a feeling, and I haven't traveled all of Thailand, is that there is always a temple in relationship to the grounds of the community. And there is always a temple in the home for quite a lot of Southeast Asian cultures. And I think it's pretty much like that across many areas, but for that particular place, that's, it's, yeah, I mean, that's an interesting question, Ieke. I mean, are certain grounds more sacred than others? It's a yeah.
But I also understood it that the temple is like very wealthy, and the homes are like in poor condition. So there's this big contrast.
And
some
of the temples, some of the temples. But I think in that one, the state of it's one of the poorer temples.
Okay.
In relationship to the more magnificent, where it's almost become a tourism product, isn't it? So I guess I'm sort of edging onto that as well. This whole thing of seeing so many women working in the flower markets just to service the temple industry. It was quite a profound experience for me to witness. It was such a scale.
So is it then it's like the people lose maybe the connection what they might have with the temple, because it becomes more an industry, and so to kind of make it their own again, maybe this walk is also part of that, because it's maybe the outdoor, the streets and around and where their homes are, maybe is the way to get back the ownership. I'm not sure, but that's my reading of it in a way as well. I
think for this community, the temple relationship and the community was strong, but I think for them as an ordinary resident living in there, to almost take on the role of sanctifying a place you know, there's a kind of feeling of that, you know, there's the leader, this lady, and the you know, which is kind of an offering that you almost imagine a monk would often offer. And maybe that's what it was kind of twisted a little bit, this symbolism and this act.
Yeah. Let's
It's 9:45.
Yeah, let's not in reality for the people who are watching.
Of course. Sorry.
We have different realities.
Edit that out.
No, but we still have enough time because we started later. But let's continue maybe to the next piece, and we always can come back. There are some questions also already, some comments I see in the comments box, so we can return to that later. Let's go to the last project that we would like to discuss. Would you first say something about it, because this is your Performateur 4, PP4. It's a collective, or it's been
changing collective.
Changing,
and I guess perhaps the premise of wanting to have a more research framework whenever you're allowing a kind of performance process to be visible. I really wanted the people who were in the ensemble that was gathered, and often because the site has changed, you know, with the beginnings, from the beginning of when I attempted to have this format right to where we just recently performed it. And I guess every time the site changes, it also depends on the kind of people I can bring to work on this piece. So a lot of it is, again, practical. You know, there's a whole heap of people I would like to invite, but there's time issue, but there's also a kind of proximity to the location of site. And I wanted everyone to come from slightly different disciplines, including non-performers. And part of it was just trying to find ways to shift what performance level, like this is what I'm interested in, and I wonder what people are out there, who are the people out there who might also be interested in the same thing. And I guess one of the things was, you know, how can we expand our performative vocabulary? And I love this idea of absurdism, because when something is absurd and made up, often you have no hold or a kind of tradition or a formula to kind of attach yourself to, in a way. But then I recently heard from you, like this word performateur is an actual word in the Dutch language, and certainly in French, it is performateur. It's someone who performs. But I guess if you're not aware of that, it also has this kind of leaning towards the amateur who is the performer. And then on the other side of the colon, you have performateur. And you have to wonder what this is about as well. And to begin with, I just gave everyone this option and freedom to imagine what these words could mean, you know, in terms of performance devising. So it was kind of fun.
Let's go and watch. Let's see what. Let's see. The video is starting.
I was a bit exhausted by then. I think I can see myself waning. It was only the 5th hour. We finished early.
Right. We don't see that. We don't see that. Well, it's very playful. I think I realize. I don't know if our the viewers realize that this is Chinatown, because I think that's very important in this performance, right? That you chose this particular location. And you also looked for participants who who grew up in an Asian country. Is that correct, or did I come up with this myself?
Part of them, like the original collective ensemble had people like that already, but I had to stretch a little bit further to find for more. They either had a parentage, so a part of them have the Southeast Asian or Asian kind of heritage, and or they were someone who had engaged with they may be of European descent, for example. So I was kind of looking for that tapestry, someone with an interest in the philosophy and aesthetics. You know how philosophy and aesthetics have this really interesting relationship, and how you're drawn to something. And then there are people who are migrants here. And so pulling the ensemble together was really important in the context that the public performances were actually going to be in Chinatown. But I did quite choose the location in the sense that the gallery that supported us and funded this and produced it for us is actually based in the heart of Chinatown, and they're called for a Center for Contemporary Australian Art. So in that context, I didn't choose, but I could work and negotiate what were the sites around Chinatown I could do. And we were also given the building of the Museum of Chinese Australian, which is actually about to be stripped on the inside. So we inhabited this place with a few other programmed artists and worked a kind of 70 to 80% outside in public space and 20% inside.
Yeah, let me see. There are some questions. I'm also very curious actually about the choice of materials, but let me see. Maybe we do first this question and then we go to the questions, because we have here a couple of people who are joining this session, and like choices of objects that you use. I'm just passing through the slideshow, and so there is like improvisation, but it's also, I see there is some unity in it, like you play together with the same type of objects in that sense. And I'm very curious how you decide on these elements to include.
I think it's definitely a group decision. And having said that, I did try to get most of the people in the group to come shopping with me to an area also in Sydney called Cabramatta that's more intensely and chaotically inhabited by Vietnamese Chinese and other kind of Southeast Asian migrants, which I imagine if people have had a sense of what Chinatown used to be decades ago, it might have been not, it's actually quite gentrified for me now. considering what it used to be. So I tried to plot them back to a more, a less kind of touristic center of a Southeast Asian community area first. And the most important is the smell. And then for everything that we pass, because I don't know whether it's the same for you in Chinatown in Holland, but it's just dense with things. There are all these objects, but but even say the Japanese artists who worked with us, like there will be some things. He couldn't stand the smell, but there will be something where he'll just go, oh, this is what it reminded me. It reminded me of this part in my childhood, and this is how we used it. So we all came from different points in a region, but we engaged in the same material, but in very particular ways. And these were the things we were trying to draw. So part of the process, which is really fun, was that every time we encountered a project that triggered a memory, we'd stop and tell the group about it. And that was really valuable. So we had a Filipino candidate, well, he's kind of the non-artist in the group. And then we had Philip Mills, who has been really practicing Tai Chi for 40 odd years and actually introduced me to the I Ching. We have Ruchi Fujimura, who's a Japanese migrant. And then we had Peter Farrer, who is half Cantonese, half Australian. I can't remember whether his dad's either Scottish or Irish. I'm not quite sure. And we've got Juliet Sato, who's half Japanese, and Emily, who is half Cantonese again. So there were all these kind of backgrounds really that could help us bring some sort of interesting exploration into sociocultural kind of embodied history. There's a kind of personal history to this all. And Alan Schacher, my partner and often working collaborator, I kind of asked him to really be the outside eye, because what I find in ensemble groups is that if I'm not often in a role where I'm stepping out like a director or something. I'm sort of in the midst of it. And it's difficult not to have someone as an outside eye. So he was really very crucial in being able to give feedback. Yeah, so that's how the objects and materials kind of came about, through the shopping process, really.
Thank you. And thank you also to mention every participant in this project. It's also nice to hear about. The first one is by Tom Isaacs. Thank you, Tom, for sharing your questions. I know that you asked a question earlier, so I'm going like you, the one that you now asked. I asked earlier about illuminations of created place. Do you see your walking practice as research for the artwork? Or is it part of the artwork self, or as its own practice? Like, so, yeah, do you see it as one whole project, or are they all like separate, maybe, as how I understand these questions, as part of the artwork or not? Yeah. Or is it research? Is research part of the artwork? How do you see that?
Well, I think walking was the method in which I could begin the process of developing the work, because I really had no idea what it was going to look like. So the walking itself was but I wouldn't say it's like everyone's got a walking practice. Even I'm not quite sure how to say that. I definitely don't have a walking practice, Tom. I walk because I don't drive. But then I'm very fortunate to have a partner who gives me trips and gives me lifts sometimes. But most of the time when I need to get somewhere, I prepare my body to walk. So I walk because I need to, and then to formalize walking as a sometimes appropriate method in which for me to enter into the process of a project. I wouldn't say it's consistently like that, but it may have featured more recently, because I realized that I'm realizing more and more consciously the value of it. And it has become more important for me because as my body is aging, I guess this has got to do, I realize, wow, the only way to keep my health is I have to make sure that I can continue walking. Maybe that's also part of it. Did I answer that question, Tom?
Tom is saying, sorry, I guess I meant walking with inhabitants and speaking about their memories, because that in itself could have been a kind of performance, or it could simply be a form of development or research.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I think in that particular instance, it was part of a development and research process. And I didn't conceive of them walking in space with me to generate an outcome. I didn't see, but it was more of holding their stories and their emotions and their memories in my body to help me to invoke the energy of the performance, but to also use it as the materialization of the sculptural work.
Mm-hmm. Let me see more also. So I want to give everybody, we also have Stefania here, welcome.
Yes.
And we have
Hi,
a question. I'm going to read it. I'm curious about, sorry, I hear your sound of your microphone. I'm curious about how you manage the temporal duration of your work. In some ways, I feel that it does not end because it lives permanently in the memory of the viewers, participants. Yet, it has to come to an end. What emotions or thoughts define these closing moments?
These closing moments, yeah. Yeah, I do see that whatever I kind of devise and am in with other people or for myself to have a kind of time and motion finiteness, but I guess what I'm always hoping to do is that there will be some images that will linger beyond the time. It's sort of one of the intentions of looking at the multiple bodily images that one can create. And I guess I also look at performance, especially in a public area, as a temporary opportunity to shift a witness's perception of time sometimes, but also of how we live and what does it mean to be human. I think these are kind of things that I play with. So the temporariness is actually accepting the finiteness of our lives as well. And at the same time, there is an open-endedness to the process of performance for me. Like, I don't think I've ever quite finished a performance properly. Like, it always feels to be like an abridged summary of a concept or an image, but in a way you could work with it multiple times and still generate extended materials out of, a concept image to begin with.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, so it's like an essay. I don't know,
Yeah.
somehow.
Yeah, I think it's also your particular practice that it's not so easily defined. I think that sometimes it might be difficult if you like curators or having to present it in a website, or it's not like this is the painting. It has so many different moments, right? It has this in before the maybe the creating memories with people by walking. and then there is this other moment where you maybe present something for the audience. So there's so many different moments that it's sometimes hard to grasp. And when do you start with the art? It's very, I think, also so very unclear, and I think that's also the beauty of it. I think that it's hard to grasp, and I think it's also nice.
Go on,
Yeah,
finish what you're saying.
Well, I also think like maybe there's also the memory that's so important in your work, and the memory, the body that holds the memory in a way. Maybe I think there is something, maybe the importance of it, that it's not about maybe what the presence is on the website or what photographs there's to see back, but it's really the memory that you give to others or that the others give to you. Just to look at the time, I feel like now we're running a little bit late. Let's see, because I want to see if there's another. I think there was another question. I think Ellen is here too, and I'm going to read it out in response to Stefania. I would say that the hope of a site responsive performance work is also to leave its imprint in the memory of place itself. That may be a kind of energetic imprint. So that's also an interesting perspective.
And to quickly answer Stefania's thing about what's the emotion around the closing moments, I guess it's a framework or this kind of vehicle for the energy to finally dissipate. Like there's a feeling even on an ensemble, like, oh, that feels it's spent. You know, so these are the closing moments, and there's a kind of it's more this so anything else that we've missed? I think we might have to
Tom Isaacs had another earlier comment. He was here. He's writing, all three performances shown today. Sorry, I'm doing it over. All three performances shown today seem to engage with the ritual to some extent. Could you speak a bit about what it means to take ritual or ritual-inflected performance into the street? So this is probably quite a big question.
I have to answer, but very quickly, it's kind of maybe synonymous to a lot of Southeast Asian rituals, because, like, remember with, unlike churches and kind of Abrahamic maybe buildings, there would be a ceremony behind closed doors. But I guess with often Southeast Asian rituals, they do get framed within a structure of a building that has permanently the doors are open for the time the entire process to take place. So I think in that sense, it's almost like a relief to be able to bring ritual to the street, because it does feel a lot closer to some sort of origin. It almost kind of regenerates it. Like, even if you weren't going there thinking of ritual, which we don't, because we're just playing with material, but just a combination of duration and the fact they are out, and you have this kind of energy of witnesses people who would normally come into a theater building. I think that really gives it another edge. Yeah, so in that sense, it makes it a little bit more real, or possible to be real. Yeah.
And I think there's also an importance to share it in the street, because it's accessible for everybody, right? It is like bringing something back, maybe, which might not be there enough. That's my thought as well, that the importance to do this as an artist.
Yeah, where you can visibly bring a kind of a cultural reflection that almost gives a balance somehow. you know. So the
Yeah.
cultural reflection is more of who all these different peoples in, you know, who inhabit this place. Yeah.
Mhm.
Yeah.
So we have to end
To wrap
this.
up.
Yeah, to wrap it up, unfortunately.
Thank you so much, everyone, for
Yes.
being here. I really appreciate it. Stefania, Tom, really appreciate it. And thank you, Ieke and Corin, for inviting me to do this and all the hard work you put in to
Yes.
sort out all these images. Thank you.
Well, I also want to thank everybody who joined today, and also for those who are watching on the 12th of November. If you have questions, please share them with us, and we make sure that WeiZen can read them and respond to them. I also want to introduce the next artist focus, which will be on November the 19th at I don't know the exact time because of the different time zones. This will be Kinderet Haya Max from Tel Aviv, Israel. And yeah, you can see here the time. It will be 15 past 11. That's Chicago time. And before we are ending, I want to let's go back maybe to ourselves. Yeah. So before we are ending, I want to also give special thanks to you, Corin, for initiating and facilitating and coordinating this artist focus series. It's very important that you do this, so I'm grateful. And I also want to thank the whole Out of Sight community for their support. And of course, I want to thank you, WeiZen, for joining us today. It was really lovely to talk with you, and I feel there's a whole lot more to discuss and about the ritual and the public space, the outdoor spaces, and I hope we can continue that conversation. Thank you. Yeah. Thank you, everybody, for joining us for today, and see you back next week.